Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you a story that will deeply move you. Let's meet Celestina Harrow, a school counselor who faced death in a tragic car accident and came back to tell us something that will shake your beliefs. On the other side, she met Jesus and received a terrible prophecy about the future of humanity, something that involves each of us. Get ready for an exciting journey full of revelations. But first, leave your like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any details of this experience that can change lives. Now, let's explore this surprising story together. It was a February afternoon in Stillwater, and the icy wind blowing through the street seemed like a silent warning that something was about to happen. I had left school later than usual as a student had been late for our counseling session. It was a 15-year-old girl named Marissa, who was dealing with her parents' divorce. "Do you think this is my fault?" she had asked with tears in her eyes, and I had spent more time than I should have making sure she didn't have to carry that burden. As I drove home, my mind was still focused on Marissa. The road was almost deserted, covered in a thin layer of ice that reflected the gray sky. I looked at the clock on the car dashboard, 5:32 p.m. Rebecca and James, my children, were probably already home, and Michael, my husband, was supposed to be finishing his last job of the day in the workshop. I used to find my ordinary routine comforting, but that day, as he drove along Highway 36, his routine would be irreparably interrupted. It happened in seconds. I saw a white truck skidding into the opposite lane. It was one of those delivery vehicles with a snow-smudged logo. The driver appeared to fight for control, but it was too late. My reflexes tried to save the moment. I turned the steering wheel to the right, but the ice made the effort useless. The impact was brutal. A deafening sound of crunching metal and shattering glass filled the air, followed by silence so absolute it seemed out of place. For a moment, I thought it was just a scare, but then I realized I couldn't feel anything. A strange serenity came over me. "Why, is that it?" I thought. My body was trapped, but my consciousness felt free. I remembered Marissa again, and a wave of regret went through me. She's going to think I left without finishing our conversation. Soon after, everything went dark. The silence was replaced by something that felt like anxious waiting, as if the entire universe was holding its breath. When my vision returned, it was not what I expected. When I opened my eyes, I realized that something was profoundly different. I was no longer in the car, nor trapped between the twisted metal and shattered glass. It was floating. There was no gravity, no pain, just an indescribable lightness. Downstairs, I saw the accident scene as if I were watching a movie. My car was unrecognizable, crushed by the side of the truck. Parameters worked frantically to pull me out of the wreckage, but there seemed to be no rush in what I felt. There was no despair, just a feeling of complete peace. I watched curiously as my body, bloody and motionless, was carefully maneuvered out of the car. It was like looking at someone else. So, this is how it ends, I thought, without fear, just with a kind of distant acceptance. Below me, I heard the muffled voices of rescuers. "Do we have a pulse?" asked one of them, leaning over my body. "Nothing. Preparing the defibrillator," replied another, with urgency in his voice. The scene had a strange beauty. Each movement seemed choreographed, as if the rescuers were performers in a ballet of life and death. Then I realized something curious. I could hear their thoughts. "That woman isn't coming back. Damn, she's so young. I hope she didn't leave behind any children. I need to hurry. We still have a chance." The empathy I felt for them was overwhelming. I wanted to somehow reassure them, say I was fine, but the words just wouldn't come. Instead, I was enveloped by an invisible force that seemed to pull me upward. The gravity, or lack thereof, increased, and I began to slowly walk away from the scene of the accident. Everything became more distant. The sounds, the faces, even the glow of the emergency lights. I felt no fear, just a growing curiosity. Something was calling me, an irresistible presence that felt familiar and new at the same time. That's when I noticed a light on the horizon. It was not just a light, but a radiation that seemed to vibrate with love and warmth. I knew, without a doubt, that I should follow her. With one last look at my body being placed on the stretcher, I allowed myself to be carried away. The light that attracted me was not like anything I had ever seen before. It wasn't just glowing. It seemed alive, pulsing with an energy that permeated everything around me. As I approached, Every particle of my being seemed to vibrate in harmony with that presence. It wasn't just something I saw, it was something I felt on a deep level, as if every emotional wound and regret in my life was being gently undone. Suddenly I realized I wasn't alone. There was a figure amidst the light. He was unmistakable, although he didn't exactly correspond to the representations I knew. It was Jesus Christ. His appearance was not like traditional images. He didn't have hard features or hair of a specific shade. He seemed to transcend physical form, radiating a light so powerful that it was almost impossible to discern the details of his face. Still, I felt like he was looking at me deeply, seeing every part of me, every thought, every mistake, and yet he loved me completely. I barely had words to describe what I felt. He didn't speak initially, he was simply there, and that was enough to fill me with an overwhelming peace. But then, in a moment of pure clarity, he began to communicate. They were not spoken words, but a direct transmission to my heart, as if he placed his ideas inside me, without intermediaries. You are not here by chance, Celestina. There's something you need to see, something you need to know. His voice, if I can call it that, was both gentle and firm. I felt a mixture of reverence and curiosity. Before I could fully process it, he reached out his hand, and the moment I touched it, I was transported to a different place. It was a vast space, similar to a heavenly amphitheater. The light was still present, but now it was projecting images around us. Each sight was so real that I could smell it, hear the sounds, as if I were living it. Jesus looked at me with a serious look, but not devoid of compassion. What you will see now is not to scare you, but to prepare your heart and your mission. Before I could respond, the first vision dawned, and the future he would begin to reveal would change my life forever. The celestial amphitheater around me was immense, with no visible walls or defined boundaries, but it seemed to contain all existence. The light of Jesus remained by my side, radiating love and strength, like an invisible shield. In the center of that space, images began to emerge, projected as if they were more real than anything I had ever experienced. The first vision was terrifying. A colossal earthquake was devastating a city. I could feel the ground shaking beneath my feet, hear the screams of desperate people, and see buildings crumbling like sandcastles. A sequence of natural disasters followed. Hurricanes swallowed entire cities, floods swept away communities, and snowstorms paralyzed entire regions. The scenes changed quickly, and an almost physical pain hit me as I witnessed so much suffering. Why is this happening? I asked, my voice thick with anguish. Jesus answered me, again without words, but directly to my heart. Creation groans for redemption. These events are signs, but many will not recognize them. Then the view changed to a global economic crisis. I saw financial markets collapsing, people crying in front of closed banks and empty supermarket shelves. The despair was palpable. Entire families wandered aimlessly, their faces marked by hunger and loss. They put their faith in the wrong things, he said, and now these things fall apart. Before he could fully absorb the meaning, another scene took shape. A man appeared, a charismatic and imposing figure. He was on a stage, speaking to cheering crowds as if he were the answer to all the world's problems. His appearance was captivating, his smile seemed genuine, but there was something about him that bothered me deeply. Even without him saying it, I knew that was the Antichrist. Jesus stood by my side as I watched. He will offer hope, but it will be false. He will use truths mixed with lies to deceive even the most devout. The vision showed the man promoting advanced technology, digital currencies, revolutionary water purification methods, and even cures for previously incurable diseases. Everything seemed promising, until I saw the true intention behind his actions. These technologies were used to monitor and control people. A social credit system evaluated behavior and punished dissenters. Those who resisted were excluded and persecuted. And the brand? I asked, not sure how I knew this was important. Jesus looked at me with sadness. It will be presented as something logical, necessary, but it will be an alliance with this system. Many will not realize what they are accepting. Finally, he showed me a temple in Jerusalem. It was an immense place, destined to unify all religions under a single spirituality. I saw miraculous healings and even climate manipulations being presented as proof that this leader was divine. But Jesus warned me, this is all illusion. True power lies in the love, truth, and freedom that I offer. When the last vision dissipated, I fell to my knees, powerless. "What can I do about this?" I asked, in tears. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. "You were chosen to witness and warn. Speak the truth, even when they don't want to hear it. Many will hear your voice and be guided to me." And so the visions ended, but the sense of urgency and responsibility would remain etched in my soul forever. Suddenly, the amphitheater of light began to dissolve around me, as if it were a veil slowly dissolving into the air. Jesus' presence remained, but I felt something different, an invisible force pulling me back, like a powerful magnet. "It's time for you to return," he said, his tone serene but final. His light continued to radiate love, but now there was a note of urgency. "I don't want to go back," I screamed, or at least I felt like I was screaming, even though it wasn't with my mouth. "Here everything is so perfect, so clear. It's confusing there, full of pain and doubts." Jesus looked at me with a love that completely disarmed me. "It's not your time yet, Celestina. There is a mission that only you can fulfill. I will be with you, but you need to return now." Before I could protest again, I felt as if my entire being was being sucked away by an overwhelming force. It was like going through a narrow tunnel at high speed, with lights flashing all around me. The heavenly peace was replaced by a feeling of heaviness and density, until suddenly, I was back. The first thing I noticed was the pain. My body felt crushed, every fiber pulsing with discomfort. There were voices all around me, urgent and full of tension. "She's back. We have a pulse," shouted a paramedic. As I tried to open my eyes, the hospital's fluorescent lights momentarily blinded me. I heard the sound of heart monitors, the constant beeping filling the room. My lungs burned, as if I had been without air for a long time, but somehow, I was alive. "Welcome back, Mrs. Harrow. You gave us quite a scare." The voice came from a doctor with kind eyes, who I would later discover was Dr. Eleanor Drake. I tried to speak, but my throat felt closed. I could only whisper, "How long?" Eleanor held my hand. "You were clinically dead for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Those numbers echoed in my mind. 4 minutes and 17 seconds. For the doctors, I should have suffered irreparable brain damage, but I was there, conscious, lucid, and with every detail of my experience intact in my memory. As the doctors discussed my miraculous condition, I knew my life would never be the same. The weight of what I had witnessed in the celestial realm was beginning to sink into my mind. The mission Jesus had mentioned now seemed like an overwhelming responsibility. With one last effort, I looked at Dr. Drake and whispered, "I need to tell you everything." She frowned, intrigued. "We will rest first, then we will talk." But I knew that resting would be impossible. My soul was on fire with the urgency to share what I had seen. The days following my return were a whirlwind of sensations. The hospital was noisy and busy, a stark contrast to the overwhelming peace I had experienced in the heavenly realm. Every sound, the beeping of monitors, the hurried footsteps of nurses, the murmur of other patients, felt like a constant reminder that I was back in the density of the physical world. My family was called as soon as I woke up. Michael was the first to enter the room. When I saw his face, a wave of emotions went through me. Relief, love, and a strange sense of disconnection. He held my hand tightly, trying to hide the visible tremor in his fingers. "You scared me, Celestina," he said on with teary eyes. I thought you wouldn't come back." I tried to smile, but his expression was full of pain. "I'm back, Michael, but..." My voice trailed off as I tried to find the words. "I saw things I need to tell you." "Not now," he replied, his voice firm. "You need to rest." Rebecca and James, our children, arrived soon after. Rebecca, with her typical teenage skepticism, crossed her arms and looked at me as if trying to decipher something. "Mom, are you really dead?" he asked directly. "I mean, what happened?" James, more sensitive and emotional, just held my other hand and looked at me with teary eyes, saying nothing. I looked at both of them and said the only thing that made sense at that moment, "I'll explain, but not yet." In the days that followed, every detail of the celestial experience seemed more vivid, more urgent. Jesus' words constantly echoed in my mind. "You were chosen to witness and warn." My physical recovery was miraculous. As the doctors continued to remind me, Dr. Drake, intrigued by my story, visited me frequently. In one of these meetings, she sat next to my bed, crossing her legs in a reflective posture. "You mentioned you wanted to tell me something. I'm listening." I took a deep breath and began, hesitant at first, but unable to stop. I told him about the light, about Jesus, about the visions he had shared with me. With each word, Dr. Drake's expression changed from curiosity to something deeper, almost a reverence. When I finished, she was silent for a long time, before finally saying, "I can't explain what you've been through, but something tells me you believe every word." But it wasn't just believing, it was knowing. And this knowledge began to shape every thought, every action. I could no longer look at the world in the same way. Everything seemed loaded with an importance that I hadn't seen before. In that hospital, amid machines and medicines, the weight of the mission that Jesus had given me began to settle. I knew it wouldn't be easy. My new reality would be a constant struggle between sharing the truth and dealing with disbelief. But there was no turning back. After my release from the hospital, life in Stillwater seemed unchanged. The same quiet streets, the same red brick houses covered in February snow, and the familiar faces of neighbors who greeted me with warm smiles. But for me, everything was different. The weight of what I had witnessed did not allow me to return to normality. The first night home, I sat with Michael in the living room. The children were already asleep, and the fireplace was crackling, spreading a welcoming warmth throughout the room. He finally broke the silence. "Celestina, I know something has changed. Ever since you woke up in the hospital, you haven't been the same." His eyes were full of concern and love. "What's happening to you?" I took a deep breath, knowing I needed to tell him everything, even though I didn't know how he would react. "I was dead, Michael. And during those minutes, I wasn't just blank. I was taken to a place of light, where I found Jesus." He was silent, but his expression hardened slightly. "Jesus, yes. He showed me things that will still happen. Disasters, crises, the emergence of someone who will deceive the entire world. He said I needed to go back to warn people." Michael ran a hand over his face, sighing deeply. "Celestina, I don't know what you saw or what you think you saw. Maybe it was his mind trying to process what happened." "No." I raised my voice a little more than I intended. "It wasn't imagination, Michael. It was real. As real as me being here now." He didn't say anything else that night, but I knew he didn't completely believe it, and that hurt more than I expected. The next day, I decided to share my experience with someone outside the family. I reached out to Pastor Gregory Lowe from the local church. He was always a trustworthy figure for me, someone I felt I could talk to openly. When I finished telling my story, he was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "Celestina, what you went through is extraordinary, but we need to be careful when interpreting these visions. Not everything we see is from God." His words were like a blow. I was sure that what I saw was divine, but his skepticism made me realize that sharing this message would not be easy. Still, I didn't give up. I started talking to small groups of friends, neighbors, and even co-workers. The reaction varied. Some were intrigued, others listened out of politeness, and many simply didn't believe it. Rebecca was one of the hardest to convince. "Mom, do you really think you saw Jesus?" he asked one night, with his eyebrows raised. "That sounds kind of crazy. I don't expect you to believe it now," I replied. "I just want you to keep this in your heart. One day, maybe it will make sense." The resistance was frustrating, but something inside me knew it was worth it. Even if just one person listened and understood, the mission would make sense. The biggest challenge was accepting that my role was not to convince, but simply to tell. The visions were not for me. They were for those who were willing to listen. As the days turned into weeks, my perception of what faith meant began to change profoundly. Before the accident, I thought faith was something silent and private, an internal refuge in difficult times. Now, I understood that faith was an active and living connection, a constant relationship with Jesus, which transcends rituals and formalities. One afternoon, while organizing some things at home, I decided to revisit my Bible, something I rarely did before the accident. Sitting at the kitchen table with the pages open to the Gospel of Matthew, the words seemed to pulse with new energy. It was as if every sentence was written directly for me. "For many will be called, but few will be chosen." Matthew 22:14. That resonated deeply. I felt like I had been chosen, but I still struggled to understand the weight of that choice. My daughter, Rebecca, came into the kitchen while I was reading. His face carried that typical expression of teenage skepticism. "Mommy, why are you so obsessed with this now?" he asked. crossing his arms. "You've never been so religious before." I placed the book on the table and looked at her, trying not to appear defensive. "It's not about religion, Rebecca. It's about knowing that he is real. I saw him, I felt his love. This is not something you can ignore once you try it." She rolled her eyes. "This still feels so surreal. How can you be sure it wasn't just your mind playing tricks on you?" I sighed, trying to remain patient. "I can't prove that to you, Rebecca. All I can do is share what happened and tell you that it changed everything for me." Despite Rebecca's skepticism, something about her expression seemed softer. She wouldn't admit it, but she was beginning to consider the possibility that what I said was true. However, sharing the message with strangers was even more challenging. I was once invited by a friend to speak at a small prayer group. I related my experience, my visions, and Jesus' warning about the future. At the end, one of the women raised her hand. "Are you saying that only those who believe in Jesus will resist this evil system?" he asked, with skepticism in his voice. I took a deep breath before responding. "It's not about religion in the conventional sense. It's about a personal relationship with him. When you truly know him, you feel the truth in your heart. This is what protects us from deception." Some took my words seriously. Others seemed doubtful. But I knew that planting the seed of faith was my duty. The reactions, whether disbelief or acceptance, did not belong to me. At each step of this new journey, a phrase from Jesus echoed in my heart: "I will be with you." And this certainty gave me the strength I needed to continue. The months following my accident were a period of adjustment and redefinition. My old life in Stillwater, with its predictable routines, seemed distant and irrelevant now. It wasn't that I had stopped loving my family or my job, but everything that had previously seemed important to me, dinner ready on time, school commitments, savings for the future, was now overshadowed by the mission Jesus had given me. Little by little, I realized that my life was being shaped by what I called divine touches. It was as if certain people were placed in my path at the exact moment to hear my story. One of these people was a young woman named Emily, who I met by chance in a coffee shop. She was sitting alone, looking at a cup of tea with a sad expression. Something in me compelled me to approach her. "Everything is fine?" I asked, as I sat at his table without being invited, but with a welcoming smile. She looked at me, surprised. "Not exactly, but I don't think you want to hear a stranger's problems." "Maybe I want to, yes," I replied. After a few moments of hesitation, Emily began to speak. She was dealing with her mother's recent death and a crisis of faith that had left her lost. As she spoke, I realized this was an opportunity. "I also went through something that changed my life," I began, sharing my experience with Jesus and the visions he showed me. Emily listened intently, her eyes filling with tears. "In the end," she asked, "do you think God still cares about me, even with all the wrong things I've done?" I held his hands and replied, "With absolute certainty, he knows you and loves you more than you can imagine." That conversation changed something in her. Months later, I received a message saying that she had found the strength to move forward and renew her faith. These interactions were increasingly frequent, but my transformation did not come without difficulties. Michael was still struggling to accept my new reality. "It doesn't feel like you're here anymore, Celestina," he said one night, as we were washing the dishes together. "It seems like you're always somewhere else, focused on something I can't see or understand." "It's because what I saw was bigger than both of us, Michael," I replied, with a hint of sadness. "But that doesn't mean I love you or our family any less. Our marriage faced tensions, but I knew that part of my mission was also to bring my family closer to Jesus, even if it took time. My new life also brought external challenges. Speaking publicly about my views has put me in difficult situations. Some people called me crazy. Others accused me of making up stories to get attention. However, there were those who listened seriously, and that gave me the strength to continue. Each day was an opportunity to witness, and although I still felt fear and doubt, Jesus' promise that he would be with me sustained me. My life was transformed, and I knew I couldn't go back. As I reflect on everything that has happened since the day of the accident, I realize that my life will never be the same again. Before, I was just a school counselor in a quiet town, with everyday worries and a quiet faith. Now I bear the responsibility of sharing a message that many will reject, but that is vital to those who choose to listen. Whenever I tell my story, I remember the look on Jesus' face as he revealed visions about the future. There was no anger or condemnation in his eyes, only sadness for those who would not recognize the signs and hope for those who would persevere. He gave me a mission, and no matter how hard it is or how much I face disbelief, I need to do it. My message is simple. Time is short. The deception I have seen is powerful and seductive. It will not come as something clearly evil. On the contrary, it will be disguised as good intentions, progress, and unity. The leader who will emerge, the control system that will be imposed, everything will be presented as necessary and logical, but it will be the biggest trap humanity has ever faced. Jesus showed me that the only way to resist this deception is through a true relationship with Him. It is not enough to attend church or know the scriptures by heart. It is necessary to live an active faith based on love, truth, and daily communion with God. He emphasized that even the most devout can be deceived if they are not deeply connected with His presence. I also remember His words of encouragement. Light and love will always triumph. Even in the darkest days, I will be with you and with all who seek me. These words are what sustain me in moments of doubt and give me the courage to continue, even when I face judgmental looks or laughs of disbelief. At the end of this report, I want to leave a message for those of you who are reading or listening to my story. Don't ignore the signs. Look for Jesus in your heart, not just in the words of others. He is waiting to reveal Himself to you, just as He did to me. Believe me, time is short, but His love is eternal, and that is the greatest truth I can share. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.